Winston as Churchill, The World Crisis, Volume 1, Chapter 19, with Fisher at the Admiralty, November and December 1914. That pale, that white-faced shore, whose foot spurns back the ocean's roaring tides, that water-walled bulwark, still secure and confident from foreign purposes. King John, Act 2, Scene 11. Lord Fisher had barely taken up his duties in the Admiralty when an incident occurred which seemed to indicate the ending of the period of German inactivity in the North Sea, which had succeeded the action of August 28 in the Heligoland Bight. Early in the morning of November 3, the unusual signal was made to the Admiralty that several German battlecruisers or battleships had been sighted off Galston on the Norfolk coast by the minesweeping gunboat Halcyon, and that she was engaged with them. Almost immediately afterwards, heavy shells were reported to be bursting in the water and on the beach near Yarmouth. The First Sea Lord and I reached the war room from our bedrooms in a few minutes. The question was, what did it mean? It seemed quite certain that German battlecruisers would not be sent to throw shells at an open town like Yarmouth. Obviously, this was a demonstration to divert the British fleet from something else which was going to happen, was already perhaps happening. Was it a German raid into the Channel, or a serious attempt by the German Navy to intervene upon the Belgian coast while the land battle was still raging? Was it a descent on the British coast at Sunderland or Blyth? We had no means of judging. The last thing it seemed possible to believe was that first-class units of the German fleet would have been sent across the North Sea simply in order to disturb the fisherfolk of Yarmouth. By other signals, our destroyers, Leopard and Lively, who were patrolling in the neighborhood of Yarmouth, also reported that they were engaged and added that they were proceeding to attack the enemy. Where were our main forces? The Commander-in-Chief was for the first time in the war at the Admiralty, whither he had been summoned to confer with the new First Sea Lord. The Grand Fleet was at Lough-Swilly in the north of Ireland. The 3rd Battle Squadron was steaming through the Irish Channel. No part of the Grand Fleet was nearer than Beatty and his battlecruisers, and these were as far off as Cromarty. Whatever happened, we could not fight a general action with our main fleet till late on the following day. Meanwhile, the Harwich striking force, the Dover flotillas, Admiral Hood's forces off the Belgian coast, and Admiral Burney's Channel fleet must do the best they could. If the German demonstration off Yarmouth was the prelude or concomitant to a serious attempt to break into the Channel, the very greatest naval events would follow. The contingency, as the reader is aware, had always been faced, and we were well aware that we should have to wait for our revenge till the next day. Meanwhile, there was nothing to be done but to put all the fleets and flotillas on guard and in motion with the double object of resisting to the utmost a German attack to the southward and intercepting as speedily as possible from the north the return of the enemy. Several hours of tension passed, and then gradually it became clear that the German battlecruisers were returning home at full speed, and that nothing else was apparently happening, and the incredible conclusion forced itself upon us that the German Admiralty had had no other purpose in hand than this silly demonstration of Yarmouth Beach. This anticlimax was fatiguing. The experience of bracing ourselves to the most tremendous events, and then finding nothing happen, was one which we were compelled more than once to undergo at the Admiralty. The new First Sea Lord was even more sure of the superiority of the British line of battle over the enemy than I was, and in this his views contrasted very sharply with those of the Commander-in-Chief. In full agreement with Sir Arthur Wilson, he proposed on his assumption of office to bring the 3rd Battle Squadron, the King Edward's, down to Portland to increase our security against a German incursion into the Channel, and he moved the 5th Battle Squadron, the Formidables, with the 2 Lord Nelsons, to Sheerness to provide battleship support for the Harwich striking force, and to give an additional security against raid or invasion. These movements were no sooner determined than news of the Battle of Coronel was received on November 4, and we were forced to make far more serious inroads upon Sir John Jellicoe's command. The battle-cruisers Inflexible and Invincible were sent as described to the Falklands, and Lord Fisher, as we have seen, demanded the Princess Royal for the Atlantic. This last order produced continuous protests from Sir John Jellicoe, and led to an interchange of telegrams and letters in which the Commander-in-Chief dwelt upon every aspect of his dangers and weakness, and the Admiralty, while insisting on their decision, endeavored to reassure and placate him. Our dreadnought margin in home waters at the outbreak of war had been just sufficient. Every ship was ready and in good order. We did not feel that we could spare one. But after the first 2 months we were compelled to send ships one at a time from each battle squadron down to their home ports on the south coast for refit. A regular system of refits, as was foreseen, had to be instituted. This involved the permanent absence of 2 or 3 of the most important vessels from the Grand Fleet. The enemy, on the other hand, lying in his main base, could always, in theory, be credited with having all his ships available at his selected moment for battle. Before, however, the drain of refits came upon us, we had succeeded in reinforcing the fleet by 5 fine ships, so that we began the war at our maximum possible strength, and always, except for the briefest intervals, held or improved on that number. The requirements of the Commander-in-Chief were, however, hard to meet. The strategy on which we were all agreed involved keeping the Grand Fleet in distant northern waters, and required very large forces of destroyers and other light craft for its local security, and for its service in battle. On the other hand, while no properly defended war harbour had yet been created capable of holding the entire fleet, various other bases had to be effectively guarded and patrolled, for which separate flotillas must be supplied. If at any time from any cause 2 or 3 ships were absent from the Grand Fleet for a week or 2, the Commander-in-Chief drew severe comparisons between the German fleet and his own. He was a master of this kind of argument. From his own side he deducted any ship which had any defect, however temporary, however small, even defects which would not have prevented her from taking her place in the line in an emergency. He sometimes also deducted 2 or 3 of the most powerful battleships in the world, which had newly joined his command because they were not trained up to the full level of efficiency of the others, and these were absolutely blotted out as if they were of no value whatever. Footnote: From the Grand Fleet by Sir John Jellicoe, page 31. End of footnote. He next proceeded to deal with the enemy. He always credited them with several ships more than we now know they had, or were then thought likely to have. In October 1914 he gave credence to a suggestion that the 4 German dreadnoughts of the König class had been completely rearmed with 14-inch guns. In 1915 the size of these guns had advanced to 15-inch. I was on both occasions compelled to set up expert committees to demolish these baseless suppositions. Unable to deny that the British line of battle could fire a broadside double in weight to that of the Germans, he developed a skillful argument to prove that this advantage was more than counteracted by other disadvantages arising from the superior displacement of contemporary German ships. He dwelt on this even at a period when his fleet had been reinforced by 7 or 8 additional units of enormous power without any corresponding accession to the enemy's strength. One must admit, nevertheless, that the withdrawal of the Princess Royal inflicted a very serious injury upon the battle cruiser squadron, and that Sir David Beatty might have had to fight an action without any margin of superiority during her absence. In this matter, however, Lord Fisher entered the lists in person. First Sea Lord to Commander-in-Chief. Personal. November 12, 1914. I want to make it clear to you what the Scharnhorst Squadron means as regards our dispositions. First, we have not heard of them since November 4. Second, they may adopt the following courses. A. Go through Panama Canal, smash our West Indian fleet and release all the armed German liners from New York, hence the Princess Royal. B. Go to southeast coast of America and stop our vital food supplies, hence the 2 Invincibles. C. Go to the Cape and raid the army base at Walfish Bay, hence the Minotaur to reinforce Albion. D. Go to Douala and relieve the Germans, destroying our ships and military expedition, hence the Warrior, Black Prince, and 3 Edgar Quinet. I hope to send Bartolome to you tomorrow with information which is too secret to be written or telegraphed. The secret information pointed to the possibility of the German endeavoring to slip 1 or 2 of their battle cruisers into the Atlantic to help the return to Germany of the Scharnhorst and Gneisenau and, incidentally, to release all their fast liners in New York. Lord Fisher became vehemently impressed with this idea, and certainly the period was one of extreme strategic tension, when some enterprise by the enemy seemed especially to be expected. Admiralty to Commander-in-Chief, November 13, 1914. Since war began, you have gained 2 dreadnoughts on balance, and will have by the 20th 27 superior units to 20. We intend Princess Royal to rejoin you as soon as Scharnhorst is dealt with. During the next month you should suspend sending ships away for refit, doing the best you can at Scapa. If, notwithstanding the above, you feel the need of reinforcements, we should propose to meet you by stationing the 8 King Edwards at Rosyth, where they would be well placed to join you for general action or to attack an invading force. This would avoid necessity for stationing cruisers there for the present. If you agree, the 8 King Edwards will be ordered to sail tonight. The Commander-in-Chief in reply asserted that the 27 units quoted included 3 ships, 2 of which had never fired a gun, and the 3rd was only partially trained. He deprecated the 3rd Battle Squadron being stationed at Rosyth, as without being covered by cruisers or sea-going destroyers, it would run a great risk from mines and submarines outside the limits of the port defense. He suggested that it was preferable to keep them at Cromarty, closely adjacent to the main base, where they would be covered by the cruisers of the Grand Fleet and by the destroyer flotillas stationed at Cromarty. The Admiralty, however, insisted on the 3rd Battle Squadron being stationed at Rosyth. Admiralty to Commander-in-Chief, November 16, 1914. The importance of preventing the enemy from making a serious attack on our coast and getting away without being engaged makes it imperative to have a force near the probable points of attack than either Scapa Flow or Cromarty, which are practically the same distance off. The coast has been so denuded of destroyers for the sake of strengthening the force with you, amounting now to 71 destroyers, that there is only a skeleton force of patrol vessels available on the east coast, amounting to 3 scouts, 23 destroyers, 12 torpedo boats, between the Naze and St. Abb's Head, a distance of 300 miles. In these circumstances, we are reluctantly compelled to decide on the King Edward's and the 3rd Cruiser Squadron going to Rosyth, and you should detach half a flotilla of the 71 destroyers at Scapa Flow to act with them. We are sending you a carefully compiled table of comparative strength of your fleet and the German High Sea Fleet, which makes it clear that without the 3rd Battle Squadron you have such a preponderance of gunpowder that with equal gunnery efficiency a successful result is ensured. The Admiralty have in mind the importance of getting back the Princess Royal as soon as the situation admits. Your proposals as to mining have been carefully considered, but the work done by our submarines in the Bight has been of such importance that it is undesirable to add to their dangers by laying mines whose positions must be very uncertain. The Germans have no difficulty in sweeping any channel they wish when they want to bring any of their ships out, and do so daily. It would be very difficult for us to lay fresh lines in any channels they sweep on account of the dangers to the mine layers from our own mines. This and preceding telegrams expressed the deliberate views of the First Sea Lord and Sir Arthur Wilson, and I was in the fullest agreement with them. The Commander-in-Chief, however, urged that the 71 destroyers mentioned by the Admiralty included 10 which were absent refitting, and pointed out with justice that the 40 destroyers of the Harwich flotillas had been omitted from those at the disposition of the Admiralty. He asked particularly for reconsideration of the order to detach half a flotilla with the 3rd Battle Squadron. Without these additional 12 destroyers, he stated that the safety of the dreadnought battle fleet was seriously endangered. A submarine attack on Scapa Flow was quite feasible, and, as I am directed to use this base, I trust I shall not be held responsible for any disaster that may occur. He concluded by pointing out that the relative strength of the High Sea Fleet and the Grand Fleet could not be decided without reference to the cruiser and destroyer strength of the two fleets. His comparative weakness in these essentials counterbalanced, he declared, any battleship superiority he possessed and made him anxious to be concentrated. Admiralty to Commander-in-Chief, November 17, 1914. We have carefully reviewed the position and given fullest consideration to your wishes. We are confident that your fleet, with its cruisers and flotillas, is strong enough for the definite task entrusted to you. In view of the grave needs we have to meet elsewhere, we cannot reinforce you at present, nor alter our dispositions. The 3rd Battle Squadron, 3rd Cruiser Squadron, and 8 destroyers should proceed to Rosyth as ordered. You have, of course, full discretion to move your fleet in any way necessary to provide for its safety and enable you to meet the enemy, and are not tied to Scapa. Every effort is being made to accelerate the completion of the submarine defenses. The destroyer question was one of real difficulty. Although we had more than double the sea-going strength of the German flotillas, we had so much to guard that we could not provide a superior force kept always intact in the hand of the Commander-in-Chief for a great fleet action. I know perfectly well, wrote Sir John Jellicoe on December 4 to Lord Fisher, that the 1st and 3rd flotillas from Harwich will not join me in time. The Germans, he declared, would have 8 flotillas comprising 88 torpedo boat destroyers, all of which would certainly be ready at the selected moment. They have 5 torpedoes each, total 440 torpedoes, unless I can strike at them first. He himself might, he claimed, fall as low as 32 or even 28 destroyers. You know, he added, the difficulty and objections to turning away from the enemy in a fleet action, but with such a menace I am bound to do it, unless my own torpedo boat destroyers can stop or neutralize the movement. There was no doubt that all the Commander-in-Chief's thought fitted together into one consistent whole and was the result of profound study and reflection. Lord Fisher, however, remained obdurate. "I think we have to stand fast," he wrote to me, enclosing Sir John Jellicoe's letter. "The Tyward mob and our overseas submarines are our sole aggressive force in the south." He proposed, however, to put one of the Harwich flotillas in the Humber. "We wait your return before action. Footnote: I was in France for 36 hours. End of footnote. Humber and Harwich, each 290 miles from Heligoland, but the complete flotilla at the Humber is very much near Jellicoe, and so a salve to him in reply to enclosed. As A.K. Wilson observed a moment ago, both he and I would probably have written exactly the same letter as Jellicoe, trying to get all we could. Yours till death, F. This was a wearing discussion, and no one can blame the Commander-in-Chief for expressing his anxieties and endeavoring to keep his command up to the highest strength. I always tried to sustain him in every possible way. His powerful orderly brain, his exact and comprehensive knowledge, enabled him to develop and perfect in his first year of the war the mighty organization of the Grand Fleet. He bore with constancy the many troubles and perplexities of the early months. His fine sailor-like qualities made him always ready, night or day, to take his whole gigantic fleet to sea, and he was never so happy as when he was at sea. Even when I did not share his outlook, I sympathized with his trials. The opinions of Lord Fisher at this period upon the margin of strength required for the Grand Fleet were, as will be seen, in sharp contrast with those he expressed at a later period during the operations at the Dardanelles. Personally, I always considered our line of battle amply superior, nor did I believe the Germans would be able to bring out at a given moment all the 88 torpedo boats with which Sir John Jellicoe always credited them. We now know the actual forces which the enemy assembled on December 16 of this same year, on the occasion when the whole High Sea Fleet made almost the most ambitious sortie into the North Sea which its history records. There were 13 dreadnought battleships and 4 battlecruisers, total 17 dreadnoughts instead of the 20 which were completed and which the Admiralty counted as available, and 53 torpedo boats in place of the Commander-in-Chief's 88. Against this, Sir John Jellicoe had, until refits were reopened at the end of November, 27 superior units, subject to what he says about them, and as many of the 71 destroyers as were fit for sea on any given day. The Germans also took to sea on December 16 a squadron of 8 pre-dreadnoughts, and against this our 3rd Battle Squadron, which had been rightly restored to the Grand Fleet, was a proper and superior provision. This balance of strength represents the period of our greatest strain in home waters and all over the world. At this, as at all other times, the Admiralty would have welcomed a general battle. An attack by seaplanes launched from carrying ships upon the Zeppelin sheds near Cuxhaven was planned by us for November 21. On the 20th, we telegraphed to Sir John Jellicoe. Our reliable German information and also our telegram number 338 to you shows, firstly, concentration of German cruisers, battle cruisers and battleships in Weser and Elbe, and secondly, disposal of their submarines to hunt in the Shetlands and English Channel. In these favorable circumstances, the aerial attack on Cuxhaven, Zeppelin jets, which we had previously planned and considered desirable in itself, might easily bring on a considerable action in which your battle cruisers and the Grand Fleet might take part without undue risk from German submarines. We suggest to your consideration Tyrwhitt and aeroplanes attacking on Monday at daybreak, with you supporting him from the northward with whatever force is necessary, if the enemy respond to the challenge. Further, if it should prove, as some reliable information indicates, that the enemy is preparing an offensive raid or sortie himself, our movement will bring on a collision at the outset unexpected and disconcerting to him. The Commander-in-Chief, after some discussion, preferred Tuesday daybreak for the attack, as the longer notice would enable him to finish certain repairing work. The Admiralty plans were altered accordingly. We telegraphed on the 21st. We consider the present a good occasion for a sweep southward by the Grand Fleet. The seaplane attack is incidental and subsidiary, though very desirable in itself. It may bring on an action now that the German fleet is concentrated near Wilhelmshaven, and their cruisers and battlecruisers are active. It will frustrate any offensive movement they may intend, as reported. Tuesday 24th at 5:30 a.m. will be the time. No result was, however, achieved. Sir John Jellicoe brought the battle fleet down into the centre of the North Sea, about 180 miles from Heligoland, with the battle cruisers about 40 miles nearer. But in the weather prevailing, the seaplanes could hardly get off the water, and the Germans remained unaware of our movements and without any plans of their own. The episode shows, however, the underlying confidence of the Admiralty and of the Commander-in-Chief in the strength of the Grand Fleet even during this time of strain. To add to the distractions of this hard month of November 1914, an invasion scare took a firm hold of the military and naval authorities. It was argued by the War Office that the lull on the fighting fronts would enable the Germans to spare large numbers of good troops, 250,000 if necessary, for the invasion of Great Britain. Lord Kitchener directed all defensive preparations to be made, and Lord Fisher threw himself into the task with gusto. Although, as the reader is aware, I was sceptical on this subject. I felt that the precautions were justifiable and would at any rate add interest to the life of our coast and home defense forces. I therefore allowed myself to succumb to the suppressed excitement which grew throughout the highest circles, and did my utmost to aid and speed our preparations. We stationed, as described, the 3rd Battle Squadron at the 4th, brought the 2nd Fleet to the Thames, disposed the old majestic battleships in the various harbours along the east coast, arranged block ships to be sunk, and laid mines to be exploded at the proper time in the mouths of our undefended harbours, while the whole coastal watch, military, aerial and marine, throbbed with activity. The army arrangements were complicated by the fact that some of the divisions which were sufficiently trained to be used to repel the invaders had lent their rifles to those that were undergoing training, and these rifles had to be collected and redistributed as a part of the procedure prescribed for the supreme emergency. To such expedients were we reduced. However, the Germans remained absolutely quiescent. The tides and the moon, which for some days before November 20 were exceptionally favorable to nocturnal landings, ceased to present these conditions, and the sense of some great impending event gradually faded from our minds. Lord Fisher to Mr. Churchill, 7 a.m., November 21, 1914. An angel's sleep, in heaven from 9 till now. It was kind of you not to wake me with Gray's credible witness. Let us entreat and urge Kitchener to send 100,000 men at once to Flanders, and warn Joffre not to be 2 divisions too few and 2 days too late. Kitchener's balance of 160,000 men will amply suffice, and the Ides of March have passed. The waning moon and dawning tide, dawn high tide, will not recur till days following December 10. Do write to him accordingly, or shall I? It has been a splendid dress rehearsal, tell him, and very reassuring. His mass of men and his mobile guns. We must press him to send 100,000 men to Flanders. On November 20, General Joffre asked for further naval cooperation on the Belgian coast. General Foch, he stated, reports that for some little time the French or English ships have no longer been participating in the action of our forces in the neighborhood of Newport. On account of very violent bombardment by the enemy in this region, it would be advantageous if the ships could attack the numerous German batteries established to the east of the mouth of the Yser. I should be glad if you would notify the Ministry of Marine and the Admiralty of this situation in order to obtain a more active cooperation on the part of the squadron between Newport and Ostend. We were able to send the old battleship Revenge, whose guns had been specially remounted for long-range fire, and several smaller vessels under Admiral Hood, and the naval bombardment of the German right was effectively resumed. The conditions on the coast, Hood, however, reported on the 22nd, are quite different from what they were during the first few days. Today there was a heavy fire from guns I could not locate or damage. No troops are ever visible. The inundation has stopped their movement. To the situation of strain and effort which gripped us during November came the welcome relief of the victory at the Falklands. Lord Fisher received it with a moderated satisfaction. "We cannot," he wrote to me on December 10, "but be overjoyed at the Monmouth and Good Hope being avenged. But let us be self-restrained, not too exultant, till we know details. Perhaps their guns never reached us. We had so few casualties. We know their gunnery was excellent. Their third salvo murdered Craddock, so it may have been like shooting pheasants. The pheasants not shooting back. Not too much glory for us, only great satisfaction. Not a battle for a poet laureate. Let us wait and hear before we crow. Then again it may be a wonder why the cruisers escaped. If they have escaped, I hope not, for we had such a preponderating force, such numbers. How the Glasgow must have enjoyed it. Anyhow, don't let us encourage ourselves in too many joy messages till we know more." But I made haste to ascribe to him all the credit that was his due. December 10. This was your show and your luck. I should only have sent 1 Greyhound and Defence. Footnote. The Greyhound is a battle cruiser. End of footnote. This would have done the trick, but it was a niggling coup. Your flair was quite true. Let us have some more victories together, and confound all our foes abroad, and, don't forget, at home. This delighted the Admiral, and in his reply on December 11 he threw a friendly light upon other fields of activity than those with which this chapter has been concerned. Your letter pleasant. There is another quite lovely scheme. I am to be praised so as to get swelled head and think myself ignored by you, and to be in your shoes. It is all too sweet for words. It is palpably transparent. I was told of this yesterday. It really is curious why they so hate you. I think I told you what G said, that though he abhorred me, yet I have splendid friends in the Tory camp. A cause of difference, however, soon arose between us. The First Sea Lord was displeased with Sir Doveton Sturdy for not having succeeded in destroying the German light cruiser Dresden with the rest, and he searchingly criticized that admiral's dispositions after the action. He wished to leave Admiral Sturdy in South American waters till the Dresden was hunted down. As it was imperative that the Invincible and Inflexible should come home at once, such a decision would have entailed transferring Admiral Sturdy's flag to the Carnarvon, and leaving him with a command scarcely suited to his rank and standing, and woefully out of harmony with his recent achievement. I was obliged to veto this proposal, and Lord Fisher was for some time much vexed at my decision. The First Sea Lord also made the disquieting suggestion that the Germans might slip a battle-cruiser like the Derfflinger through our blockade in the long winter nights and fall upon the returning Invincible and Inflexible, who had fired away 3/4 of their ammunition. I was greatly disturbed at this, and hastened to the Chief of the Staff. But Admiral Oliver was not often found improvident. He had already, several weeks before, sent the battleship Vengeance with a quarter outfit for both vessels to St. Vincent, where it awaited them. In spite of their anxieties, November and December were months of rapidly growing power to the Navy. The variety and scope of Admiralty business extended continually, and the number of important directions to be given increased every week. The reader who is further interested should study in the appendix the selection of First Lord's minutes, which I have thought it worth while to print. From these original documents, conceived under the pressure of events, a truer idea can be formed of what was passing than from much description. In no part of our work did Lord Fisher and I act together in greater harmony than in the realm of new construction. The first task of the Admiralty in naval construction on the outbreak of war was to accelerate the completion of all the warships which were building in Great Britain, and according to the schemes we had prepared before the war, extreme priority was to be assigned to vessels which could be finished within 6 months. On this basis we proceeded during the first 3 months. When it became clear that the war would not be ended one way or the other by the first main decisions on land, and that the sea battle was indefinitely deferred, I extended this original period, and we adopted the principle, everything that can be finished in 1915 and nothing that can't. This brought very large numbers of vessels into the accelerated class and, of course, opened the way for a considerable new construction of submarines, destroyers, and even light cruisers. There had already been ordered, when Lord Fisher arrived at the Admiralty, a score of new destroyers and submarines, in addition to all the pre-war vessels under accelerated construction. The yards were therefore full of work, and care was needed not to impede current construction by new orders. Lord Fisher, however, brought a very great surge of impulse to this sphere of our activities. It was a moment when megalomania was a virtue. Some progress had already been made on 2 of the British battleships of the programme of 1914–15. The First Sea Lord at once demanded to make them into battle cruisers, sacrificing 2 more guns in each in order to get the immense speed for which he thirsted. I agreed to this, although it involved some delay, and the Repulse and the Renown were redesigned accordingly. The construction of submarines was more urgent. I was not alarmed about the immediate position, although all sorts of rumors were afoot. Naval Intelligence Division, November 7, 1914. With reference to your report of yesterday, apparently attaching credence to a statement that from 100 to 200 small submarines have been manufactured secretly in Germany, have you considered how many trained officers and personnel this important flotilla would require? What evidence is there at your disposal to show that the Germans have trained this number of submarine captains and officers? I have always understood that their flotilla of submarines before the war did not exceed 27. There is no personnel that requires more careful training than the submarine personnel. All the experience of our officers shows that a submarine depends for its effectiveness mainly upon its captain. The function of the Intelligence Division is not merely to collect and pass on the Münchhausen tales of spies and untrustworthy agents, but carefully to sift and scrutinize the intelligence they receive, and in putting it forward to indicate the degree of probability which attaches to it. It appears to me impossible that any large addition to the German submarine force can be made for many months to come. Even if the difficulties of material were overcome, those of personnel would impose an absolute limit. It is very likely that a few small portable submarines have been prepared for coast work. Winston as Churchill. But the future already contained its menaces. I greeted Fisher on his arrival with the following minutes, the first two of which were addressed to his predecessor. To Secretary and Third Sea Lord, October 13, 1914. Please state exactly what is the total submarine program now sanctioned by the Cabinet or under construction in the various yards. What measures can be adopted for increasing the number of submarines? Is it possible to let further contracts for submarines on a 15-month basis? It is indispensable that the whole possible plan for submarine construction should be kept at the fullest pressure night and day. Winston S. Churchill. To Secretary, First Sea Lord, Naval Secretary, October 28, 1914. Please propose without delay the largest possible program of submarine boats to be delivered in from 12 to 24 months from the present time. You should assume for this purpose that you have control of all sources of manufacture required for submarines, that there is no objection to using Vickers drawings, and that steam engines may be used to supplement oil engines. You should exert every effort of ingenuity and organization to secure the utmost possible delivery. As soon as your proposals are ready, which should be in the next few days, they can be considered at a conference of the Sea Lords. The Cabinet must be satisfied that the absolute maximum output is being worked to in submarines. We may be sure that Germany is doing this. Third Sea Lord's Department must therefore act with the utmost vigor, and not be deterred by the kind of difficulties which hamper action in time of peace. Winston S. Churchill. To Secretary, First Sea Lord, Third Sea Lord, October 30, 1914. More important than the deliveries of battleships is the acceleration of light cruisers and submarines. With regard to light cruisers, it ought not to take more than 1 year to construct Castor, Inconstant, Cambria, and Canterbury. What is the present position of these ships? Have they been begun yet? Proposals should be made which secure their delivery before the end of 1915. Second, proposals should also be made to accelerate Royalist, Cleopatra, Champion, and Carrisford, Conquest, and Calliope, so as to obtain deliveries in February. This will only be possible by working night and day in 3 8-hour shifts on all these vessels, arranging with other firms not concerned in their construction to lend the necessary men. Third, all the M-class destroyers to be delivered in August 1915 should be pushed forward into April and May. There is surely no reason why this cannot be done. Firms who will undertake to complete their vessels by this date could be immediately given another order for a repeat ship, so that there would be no fear of dislocation of their business. Let me have proposals on this. Fourth, submarines F2, F3, G6, G8, G15, G9, G7, G10, and G13, and G1 to G5 all ought to be delivered before the end of 1915. There is an extraordinary gap after G4 when for 6 months we do not receive a single new submarine, and in 12 months we only receive 2. This is shocking and must be bridged at all costs. Pray let me have further proposals after such conferences as may be necessary with the firms concerned. Winston as Churchill. Lord Fisher hurled himself into this business with explosive energy. He summoned around him all the naval constructors and shipbuilding firms in Britain, and in 4 or 5 glorious days, every minute of which was pure delight to him, he presented me with schemes for a far greater construction of submarines, destroyers, and small craft than I or any of my advisers had ever deemed possible. Mr. Schwab was at that time passing through England on his return to the United States. We invited him to the Admiralty, and he undertook to build 24 submarines, 12 in Canada and 12 in the United States, the bulk of which were to be completed in the hitherto incredibly short period of 6 months. I arranged a system of heavy bonuses for early delivery. These large negotiations were completed, and the subsequent work was carried out with wonderful thoroughness and punctuality by the immense organization of the Bethlehem Steel Company. One evening, as Lord Fisher, Mr. Schwab, and I sat round the octagonal table in the Admiralty, after a long discussion on the submarine contracts, we asked Mr. Schwab, "Have you got anything else that will be of use to us?" He thereupon told us that he had 4 turrets carrying 2 14-inch guns each, which had almost been completed for the Greek battleship Salamis, then building in Germany for Greece. We set our hearts on these, and I had an idea. The reader will remember the 3 small monitors building for Brazil, which, although no one could see any use for them at the time, I had decided to take over at the outbreak of war. The operations on the Belgian coast had shown their value. I suggested to Lord Fisher that we should buy these 14-inch turrets and build monitors to carry them. The Admiral was delighted with the plan, and in a few hours he was closeted with his constructors, designing the vessels. In all our correspondence we referred to them as the Styx class. To Secretary and First Sea Lord, December 11, 1914. We ought without delay to order more Styx class for heavy inshore work. There are, for instance, the 4 reserve 13.5-inch guns of the Audacious, which should certainly be mounted in new monitors. It should also be possible to draw from the reserve of 15-inch guns and to make in a short time 15-inch or 18-inch howitzers. We require now to make ships which can be built in 6 or 7 months at the outside, and which can certainly go close inshore and attack the German fleet in its harbors. These are special vessels built for a definite war operation, and we must look to them in default for a general action for giving us the power of forcing a naval decision at the latest in the autumn of 1915. Our thought is proceeding independently on the same lines. I propose as a basis of discussion that in addition to the 4 Schwab monitors, we prepare 8 more at a cost of not more than £700,000 apiece. These vessels should be armed either with 13.5-inch or 15-inch guns, 2 or 4 in each as convenient. Or, alternatively, they should be armed with 4 18-inch howitzers in separate cupolas sunk low in their heavily armored turtlebacks. They should draw 8 feet at most and be propelled entirely by internal combustion at a speed not exceeding 10 knots. No funnels, 3 or 4 alternative telescopic masts for fire observation, strong trinolines 20 feet away all round to make them immune from mine or torpedo, etc. Winston as Churchill. We soon embarked on an extensive scheme of monitor building. Besides making 4 monitors to carry the American 14-inch gun turrets, we took 2 spare 15-inch gun turrets, which had been prepared for the 2 of the furthest of new battleships, now converted into battlecruisers, and 8 12-inch gun turrets out of 4 Majestics, which we laid up. And with these and the American guns, we armed no less than 14 monitors, namely 2 with 2 15-inch guns, 4 with 2 14-inch guns, and 8 with 2 12-inch guns apiece. Lord Fisher then went on and pulled the 9.2-inch guns out of the old Edgars and mounted them in 14 small monitors drawing 6 feet 6 inches of water, and 10 6-inch guns were mounted in still smaller monitors drawing 5 feet and 11 inches. Footnote: 2 of the guns had to be removed from each of the 5 Queen Elizabeths, owing to spray interference. That is a total of 10. End of footnote. We also built later on 12 large river gunboats capable of being transported by rail for service on the Danube, if we ever got there, and 12 small river gunboats or baby monitors for service on the Tigris and the Euphrates. The bulk of the large monitors were constructed in Belfast with extraordinary celerity by Harland and Wolff and their sturdy ardent men. We also prepared 240 lighters with steel shields and internal combustion engines for landing troops under fire. Thus, in the autumn of 1914, under various programs culminating in the great Fisher impetus, we set on foot the following enormous fleet, all due to complete by the end of 1915. Battleships and battle cruisers of the greatest power, 7. Light cruisers, 12. Destroyers of the largest class and leaders, 65. Oversea submarines, 40. Coastal submarines, 22. Monitors, heavy, 18, medium, 14, light, 5. Sloops and smaller anti-submarine vessels, 107. Motor launches, 60. X-lighters with internal combustion engines, 240. This tremendous new navy, for it was nothing less, was a providential aid to the Admiralty when more than 2 years later the real German submarine attack began. Its creation on such a scale is one of the greatest services which the nation has owed to the genius and energy of Lord Fisher. Probably Fisher in all his long life never had a more joyous experience than this great effort of new construction. No man knew better than he how to put war thought into a ship. Shipbuilding had been the greatest passion of his life. Here were all the yards of Britain at his disposal, and every treasury barrier broken down. Of the battlecruisers Repulse and Renown, and still more of the light battlecruisers Courageous, Furious, and Glorious, to which I consented 4 months later in circumstances which will be narrated in their place, it must be said that they were an old man's children. Although possessing many marvelous qualities, never hitherto combined in a ship of war, they were light in the bone, and the Navy always considered them waning in the structural strength and armor which the new conditions of war more than ever required. Nonetheless, their parent loved them dearly and always rallied with the utmost vehemence when any slur was cast upon their qualities. I presided over all this process in November and December with the greatest admiration for the First Sea Lord, but with some misgivings on the score of expense. I was not yet satisfied that the war would be prolonged beyond 1915, and I did not wish to draw away from the armies men or material which might be needed in their service. Not until April 1915, when the failure of Russia as a decisive factor became final, did I authorize a further extension of view to December 31, 1916, and agree to plans for additional new construction being made within that limit. Meanwhile, I endeavored to satisfy Lord Fisher as best I could. I pointed out to him repeatedly that from some points of view a ship finished 12 months before the end of the war was worth 12 times as much as a ship finished 1 month before its end, and urged continuously that vessels nearest completion must in no way suffer. He was, however, very difficult to feed. In a day he would sketch the design of a capital ship. In a week he would devour a program and come back asking for more. A tidbit like an 18-inch experimental gun, which I suggested he should make, was snapped up the moment it was mentioned. "I will put it in a light cruiser and drive her 40 knots, he cried. "Hit how you like, when you like, where you like." This was his theme. But what about his doctrine, armor is vision? However, I backed him up all I could. He was far more often right than wrong, and his drive and life force made the Admiralty quiver like one of his great ships at its highest speed.